viewers, I'm Mukama David, and in this movie, I'm gonna show you tables in details. In Management Studio, we can create a table by going into the Databases folder and finding the folder that will represent our tables. Right-click on it and point to New, and you will see that we have lots of different options. The first one that just says Table is the standard type of data table used in most relational databases. But you can also create memory-optimized tables, which will store data in system memory as well as on disk so that it's faster to read and write. Temporal tables maintain time and date stamps for every change made to the data they store. This allows you to essentially look back in time and see the state of data as it was at any point. Regular data tables don't include this capability and can only show you the current state of the data. Ledger tables are a new feature for SQL Server 2022. They use cryptography and blockchain technologies to securely protect data from unauthorized changes. The data stored in a ledger table will show evidence of tampering during an audit and maintains the historical record of previous values so that any alterations that are made during an attack can be identified and corrected. Graph tables are structured differently than tables that follow the relational model of storing data. With graph tables, you store things called nodes and edges that define a web of interrelated connections. Finally, we have external tables, which are for connecting to Hadoop and Azure Blob storage locations, and files tables for storing files inside of SQL Server database. So those are a lot of advanced options that you can leverage depending on the kinds of data that you will be storing and your specific requirements. We are going to stick to the standard relational database, so come up here to the very top and click the options that says Tables. That will open up a new tab on the right where we can supply the name, data type, and other details for each column that will make up our new table structure. So let's define the columns that will allow us to store the names and addresses of the company's customers. We'll start with a column named First Name. Remember our naming conventions. I'm not going to use any spaces between the two words here. I'm going to capitalize the first letter of each word. So that's the column name. We now need to choose a data type or the type of information that will get stored inside of this column. SQL Server suggests the nchar 50 data type by default. This is a little cryptic if you've never been exposed to it before, so let me break down what this means. The letter N at the beginning indicates that this data type will allow characters from the full Unicode character set, which is a great choice for people's names since it's likely that you will need to store information about people with names that include letters from non-Latin languages. The char or CHR portion of the data type's name means that this is going to store character data or text. Specifically, the char is a fixed length text, and the 10 in the parenthesis indicates the number of characters that will be stored in this column. If the name that we type in for any customer's record is less than 10 characters, then SQL Server will add spaces to the end and pad it out to 10 characters. However, if I try and type in a name that has more than 10 characters, it's not going to allow it. It will just chop off the name at the 10 character limit. This is not quite ideal, so I'm going to change the data type using the drop-down menu. I'll choose the option of nvarchar 50 instead. This will keep the Unicode support with the letter N at the very beginning, but it turns it into a variable length character field. That's what the varchar portion of the name means. With this data type, the 50 in parentheses now means that the field will allow a maximum of 50 characters. As you can see from this drop-down menu though, there's a long list of different data types that we can choose from. And I'll go more into detail about these options next time. Let's now think about Allow Nodes column. I do want to make sure that I capture our customer's full name, so I will uncheck the box here to force this piece of information to be supplied before SQL Server will store the record in the database. So essentially we are saying, do not allow null values or blanks in this particular column. So that finishes the details that we need for the first column. Let's go ahead and add a second column to this table structure. We'll store the last name data now. Once again, I'll choose the nvarchar 50 data type from the drop-down menu, and also I will uncheck this option to allow nulls. Next up, we need a column to store the customer's address. For this, I'll choose the mVoucher data type again, but I actually want to store more than 50 characters. So with this selected, I'll click off a bit to populate the change to the data type, and then I'll come down and take a look at the column properties below. You can see we have the data type listed as mVoucher here, and the length is specified as 50. I can make a change here. If I want to change it to allow more characters in this column, I could just type in 100, for example, and press enter, and you'll see that the data type up above gets updated. So now this column will allow a maximum of 100 characters instead of just 50. Now, I want our address information to be optional for each customer, so I will leave the check here for allowing nodes in that particular column. Next up, let's create a column to allow the city data. For this, an mVoucher 50 should be sufficient for the data I want to store, and once again, I will allow nodes. Finally, I will create a column to store the state data. Once again, I'll choose an mVoucher 50 and leave allow nodes checked. So that's enough columns to get us started with our new table, so let's go ahead and save it now. If you press Ctrl S on your keyboard to bring up the Save dialog box, and I will name this table Customers. I'll press Enter, and then I'll go ahead and close the tab. Now, if I expand the Tables folder, you should see that new Customers table that has been added into our database design. Now, you might be wondering what this DBO is before the name. This is called a schema, and it's a way for SQL Server to group tables together in order to make them easier to manage. We didn't provide a specific schema for this table, so it got placed in the default DBO or database owner schema. In larger databases, schemas can help control user access. So for instance, if you have a warehouse manager as one of your database users, you could group all of the tables that they need access to under a warehouse schema and then give the manager ownership of that schema. This will allow them to access all of the tables within the schema group, but keep them out of the tables in human resources schema, for example. Until we get around to creating custom schemas in our database, all of our tables will be placed in the same DBO schema group. At this point, we have our table started. If you need to get back into the designer to make changes to the table, right-click on the table name and choose Design from the pop-up menu. That will bring you right back into that tab. Let's go ahead and close the tab again. At this time, I'll right-click the table and choose Select Top 1000 Rows. This will usually bring up the first 1000 records of data stored in the table. Now, obviously, we haven't added any data yet, but it will allow us to see the structure of the table in the typical orientation, with the column names listed here in this grid at the top of the screen. Thank you very much. This is a project that I designed to look for a job.